Hi everyone, and welcome to today's episode of The Daily Grind. In today's episode, I want to talk to you about the finishing touches on my denim jacket. And I was working on the buttonholes yesterday and also some of the buttons, so I want to give you the scoop on the buttonholes in this episode. So when I was working on these, I mentioned before I was going through two machines to get the perfect buttonhole, and I picked the machine that had the stabilizer plate. So the stabilizer plate really helped me out on these buttonholes, but after your buttonholes are done, what you want to do is apply fray check to your buttonholes before you cut them open. So if you look right here, you're going to see the inside. Now when I use fray check or fray block, I'll tell you which one I prefer and why. The one that I prefer is right down here. It is fray block. And the reason why I prefer fray block is because it supposedly dries more softly. And if you use fray check, it does dry more like a harder finish. It's clear, but it does dry. And if you are wearing a garment where you applied fray check on the inside, it could tend to scratch your skin. So fray block is my fray protection of choice, and that's what I used on this jacket. Now you can see right here that it is kind of old. I have used a lot of it. So what happens is when you take the cap off, the top tends to goop up, if you know what I mean. So this is why I say bent pins. I don't know if you can see this. It's definitely bent. And I'll stick this in the hole in the top, and then I'll wiggle it around, and then I will be able to squirt it out. But the only drawback to this is that it doesn't squirt out perfectly. Like I'll squirt some out and then it will stop squirting out. So I have to keep reinserting the pin and wiggling it around. So what I chose to do then was to squirt a blob into a throwaway paper bowl, or it could be a plastic bowl, and then get a Q-tip. So that's what I did, because the first time I did this, I took it out and I was wiggling the pin around, and I went to move it up from the bottom, and I was so lucky because I had my jacket on the kitchen table and I was going to apply the fray check, and I was squirting it, and a big blob squirted right way out, and it landed on my mail. And I was so glad, because can you imagine if it would have landed somewhere else where I didn't want it? I don't know if that would fully come out. So, and plus this is a light color. So I squirted a blob into my bowl, used a Q-tip, and then what I did was I ran the fray check along the center of the buttonhole, not this fast, but just slowly working it in, covering up the center and also the stitches on that buttonhole as well. So you want to make sure that you protect your buttonholes from fraying. A little bit goes a long way. And then you wait for that to dry. Typically it takes about, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes. So just let your jacket hang after you've worked on all the buttonholes. And I'm talking every buttonhole from the sleeve cuffs to the tabs in the back. And then when it dries, you can get out your cutter, if you have one, or use your seam ripper to cut those buttonholes. All right, I'm going to tell you where or what type of buttonhole cutter I like to use, because gone are the days when I would rely on a seam ripper. No, thank you. I've had too many mishaps with seam rippers. So let's look down at my cutting table, and I'm going to show you my favorite tool for cutting buttonholes. And I think that if you do a lot of buttonholes, you'll want to get one of these too. We're ready to cut the buttonholes, but what I want to show you is something I doubt I will ever use again to cut my buttonholes. Never say never though. This is my very sharp seam ripper, and we used to use a seam ripper to open up our buttonholes, okay? And we used to put a pin at either end to make sure that we wouldn't go through the end of the buttonhole. But there is a better way, just like, you know, they come out with new and improved tools. So approximately 20 years ago, I went to the store where I worked and I bought a buttonhole cutter set. I have no idea if it's still $8.49. It's probably more like $12 or $13 now. But in my buttonhole cutter set, I got a little wooden apple, and I did get an awl. I still have the plastic covers on, which is absolutely amazing. And this can be used to cut holes too. I just like my little hole punching die better. And then this is the Buttonhole Chisel, and this is what you're going to use to cut your buttonholes, and it works beautifully. I have never used anything but on my buttonholes because it's an awesome tool. And right now I'm going to show you how to use it. As with anything, when you're doing this, you always want to make sure that you do sample buttonholes, plenty of them, and I did a lot. I even did a sample snap or jeans button installation. You want to do that also to make sure that everything is going okay. So right here, I have my buttonhole. I'll zoom in a little closer so you can see what I'm doing here. And I'm going to use my buttonhole cutter. You want to make sure that you have your little wooden apple underneath because you don't want to cut your cutting surface. And the point is it's like a wedge here. So like right here, it is, let me get the camera in there. This is a wedge at the end. So it is very, very fine. So I'm just going to angle that in the middle of that buttonhole. Check from both sides because I don't want to cut my stitching, but if I do, I'll deal with it. And then press down and it cuts right through, okay? And then I'll move it down again. And, okay. And I'm gonna do it right over here. So then you have a beautifully chiseled buttonhole. Now off camera, I'm gonna check to make sure I got everything. I do think that I got to do a little bit more in here. I don't know if I fully cut that, but I will check off camera. And then this is the next one I had to do. Again, make sure your little apple, wooden or whatever wooden piece they inserted now is in there, and then just center it right in there. And let me look from the other side. Don't want to cut my stitches, but if I do, I got a way to fix it. Okay, and do that. And always do this from the right side because I did make a mistake on one of mine doing it from the wrong side. It's very narrow up here, so I'm going to do this off camera, but I want to show you what happened on this one. Not a pretty sight right here. So I was cutting from the wrong side and I accidentally cut into my stitches. So what I'm going to do, like not the stitches here, but I cut into the stitches right here. So I'm going to kind of separate this just a little bit, go back to my sewing machine, flatten that out. Now I did put fray check on there, so it's going to hold. And then I'm just going to go over this with a very nice, very narrow zigzag that will replicate the original zigzag stitch of the buttonholes. And then I'll just kind of tidy that up, put a little more fray check on there. But whenever you have a problem like that, these problems can happen. I was like, oh shoot, I did it from the wrong side. Every other buttonhole is perfect. But I'll get that to look just wonderful. Used a lot. And that is how I slice open my buttonholes. Never been easier. All right, so that's it with our buttonholes for today. Hopefully you've learned something new and you will be able to carry that over into your own projects at home. All right, thanks for watching.